When people talk about dreams, they often mean the kind that appear in sleep, fleeting, vanishing as soon as you open your eyes. But my dream was different. It wasn't fragile. It wasn't temporary. It was stitched together from small sacrifices, piece by piece, until it had weight. Until it had form. Until I could taste the salt of the ocean I was determined to see again, this time not as a young bride, but as a grandmother surrounded by the family I had built. It began with a jar. An old mason jar tucked behind a stack of flour bags in my kitchen cabinet. I called it the dream jar. No one else knew about it, not Nathan, not the grandkids, not my daughter-in-law Tanya. Every time I skipped something small, a bottle of vitamins I didn't really need, a new pair of house slippers, the flavored tea I used to love, I'd fold the money and slip it into that jar. $5, $10, sometimes only a single dollar bill, but over time it grew. Quietly. Patiently. Like hope tends to do. For 3 years I saved. I canceled cable, I turned the thermostat down at night and wore double socks. I said no to lunches out with friends, making excuses about a tight month. The truth was I was saving for something bigger, something that mattered more than any lunch or pair of shoes ever could. Because my dream wasn't just Hawaii. It was connection. It was family. It was love being seen, not just assumed. James and I had gone to Hawaii for our honeymoon. We were 24, broke, and wide-eyed. We shared one suitcase between us and split sandwiches for lunch because eating out felt too extravagant. On the second day, James got such a terrible sunburn that he wore the hotel bedsheet like a cape, walking around the room pretending to be a ghost. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. He told me later it was the happiest week of his life, and though we had many beautiful years together after that, I believed him. When James died, the house felt emptier than I could stand. But one night, while sitting alone with a photo of him smiling in the Hawaiian sun, I made a promise. I would take the family there. Our son, our grandchildren. I wanted them to feel the sand his father once walked, to know the water that had kissed his skin. Maybe, I thought, standing on that same shore together would remind Nathan where he came from. Maybe it would remind him who had loved him first. So I planned. Oh, how I planned. I researched villas that could fit all 9 of us comfortably. I spent hours with the travel agent discussing dietary needs, sleeping arrangements, even wheelchair access for Tanya's mother. I ordered matching t-shirts that read "Family is Forever, Hawaii 2023." Each name printed across the front, each shirt tucked carefully into the right suitcase. I bought little keychains that said "Aloha, Grandma loves you," and packed them into bags for each grandchild. Every detail mattered. Every choice was a thread weaving the picture of a family moment I desperately wanted to create. I imagined us all at the beach together. The children squealing, building castles in the sand. Tanya smiling, genuinely smiling, as I handed her a fresh towel or sunscreen. Nathan sitting beside me at sunset, maybe even holding my hand like he did when he was small. And at the center of it all, James. His memory. I had bought a lavender candle, his favorite scent. My plan was simple. One night we'd gather by a fire pit on the beach, barefoot in the sand. I'd set James's photo on the table, light the candle, and invite everyone to share a word, a memory, a blessing in his honor. In my mind, there would be tears, laughter, and most of all, togetherness. That was my dream. Not luxury, not escape. Just 1 week where love was enough to knit us back together. By the time the travel fund reached $21,763.84, I felt ready. I had sold old furniture, tutored English online late into the night, and pinched every penny. The jar became an account, the account became a booking, the bookings became an itinerary. Flights, villa, luau tickets, snorkeling lessons, breakfast baskets, every piece of the trip carefully paid for and confirmed. And then came the text. It was 11:02 p.m., 2 nights before we were supposed to leave. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading glasses perched on my nose, the refrigerator humming softly behind me. I had just finished labeling the Ziploc bags with sunscreen bottles, one for each child. My hands were still sticky from tape used to wrap the souvenir bags. The phone buzzed. Nathan's name lit up the screen. "You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it only her family. You've already done your part by paying." I read it once. Then again. The phone buzzed a second time. "Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. It's not personal. It's just simpler this way." Simpler. I didn't reply. I just stared at the glowing screen until it went dark, then set it face down on the table. No phone call. No thank you. Not even a lie to soften the blow. Just a reshuffling of family, quiet and cold, where the woman who raised him was no longer part of her family. I sat there in the dark kitchen, the labeled bags of sunscreen and souvenirs lined neatly beside me, and felt something worse than sadness. Worse than anger. I felt shame. Shame for dreaming. Shame for hoping. Shame for thinking I could buy my way back into a family that had already decided I wasn't part of the picture. I looked at the small duffel I had packed for myself. 2 sundresses, James's photo, the lavender candle. I thought of the moment I had planned, all of us barefoot in the sand, a child's hand in mine, asking, "Did Grandpa love the beach too?" I thought of my answer. Yes. He loved it more because he shared it with me. But none of that would happen now. Because I wasn't invited. That night, with the house dark around me, the only light a dim glow from the under-cabinet bulbs, I asked myself a question no mother should ever have to ask. When did I become a burden to the family I built? And though I didn't know it then, that text at 11:02 p.m. wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. There's a cruelty in silence. It doesn't scream. It doesn't slam doors. It simply withdraws, little by little, until you realize you've been erased without anyone needing to say the words out loud. That's how it was with Tanya. I used to think we might be friends, once upon a time. In the early years, after she and Nathan married, I bought her small gifts, scarves in her favorite color, cookbooks I thought she'd like, little notes tucked into holiday cards. She'd smile politely, say thank you, and then set the gifts aside like they were obligations to endure, not tokens of care. But it was never outright rejection. Never obvious. That was her way. A glance here. A missed call there. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Slowly, over the years, the omissions grew. A family photo posted online without me in it. A holiday dinner where my seat at the table was replaced by her cousin's. A birthday party invitation that got lost in the mail. I tried not to mind. I told myself she was busy, or maybe she didn't know how much those little things hurt. I told myself to give her time. After all, she was the mother of my grandchildren. That meant something. But Hawaii was supposed to change everything. The night after Nathan's text, I sat in the living room staring at my half-packed bag. My heart kept whispering, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe Tanya doesn't know the whole story. Maybe Nathan didn't explain. So I checked my email. Not because I wanted proof, but because I wanted comfort. I wanted to see my name listed somewhere official, something undeniable that would anchor me back into the family. And that's when I saw it. A forwarded confirmation email from the travel agency. Subject line, final itinerary, family group of 8. I counted once. Twice. 8. Not 9. Each name listed clearly, Nathan. Tanya. The children. Tanya's mother. Tanya's sister and her husband. And then, silence where my name should have been. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the email like it was mocking me. You don't belong here. You were never written in. When I called Nathan, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual, like nothing was wrong. Hi, Mom. I swallowed. Nathan. I saw the email. Why am I not on the list? There was a pause, the kind that tells you the other person is choosing their words carefully, not because they care about your feelings, but because they don't want to deal with them. Tanya thought it would be less stressful if it was just her family this time, he said. His voice was low, almost apologetic, but not enough. Never enough. Her family? I repeated, the words catching in my throat. Nathan, I'm your family. He sighed, the kind of sigh that carries more annoyance than sorrow. Don't make this harder, Mom. You've already done so much. You paid. That was enough. Enough. 2 decades of raising him. Holding him when he was sick. Cheering at his high school graduation with tears in my eyes. Biting my tongue when he made choices I worried about. Loving his children as if they were my own heartbeat. And now my place was reduced to a payment. A transaction. A role filled. I whispered, so you're saying I was never supposed to go? Silence. Then his voice, softer. It's better this way. Stay home. Focus on you. Focus on me. As if I hadn't spent 3 years focusing on them. I hung up the phone. My hands were still trembling, but inside, something began to still. It was the kind of clarity that only comes when there's nothing left to lose. I sat back down at the computer and opened the bank account I had created for the Hawaii trip. I had named it True Family Fund. The balance showed every dollar I had worked for, every hour I had stayed up late at the computer tutoring, every skipped grocery item, every time I told myself not now, later, Hawaii will be worth it. And then I saw the details. The flights. The villa. The excursions. All booked under my account. All tied to me. In that moment, a strange thought came to me. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. On paper, I was central. I was the anchor of it all. The irony stung. In their hearts, I didn't exist. But in the world of numbers and bookings and confirmations, I was the only one who did. I closed the laptop. My body felt heavy, but my mind was awake, sharper than it had been in years. I realized something that night. Something Tanya and even Nathan hadn't thought about. They had erased me from their story. But they had forgotten I was the one holding the pen. The night after Nathan's call, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same picture, the 8 of them boarding a plane, smiling, luggage rolling behind them, while I stood on the outside of the glass, forehead pressed against it, invisible. But there was another picture too, quieter, sharper. It was me, sitting alone at the kitchen table, the account details glowing on my laptop. Numbers and names. Flight bookings, villa reservations, excursions. Every piece tied to me. Every piece resting in my hand, whether they had remembered it or not. I sipped lukewarm tea as the realization hardened inside me. I wasn't powerless. For so long, I had been quiet. The good mother, the agreeable grandmother, the woman who didn't complain, who gave and gave until she was nearly hollow. But now? Now, silence could be my answer. I opened the bank's online portal and hovered my mouse over the button. Freeze account. 1 click. That was all it would take. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. Was this revenge? Was this cruel? The voice inside me whispered back, no. This is truth. This is reality. They had told me I wasn't part of the family. They had told me to stay home. And now I would. But if I was absent, then so was my money. I clicked. The account locked. The bookings unraveled. And for the first time in years, I felt steady. The messages began the next morning. First, a buzz from Nathan. Mom, did you touch the account? Something's wrong with the tickets. I didn't answer. An hour later. Mom, call me. Please. We're at the airport. The kids are freaking out. Then Tanya. This is unbelievable. Do you realize what you've done? You've ruined everything. I stared at her words, cold and sharp on the screen, and let them sit there. My tea grew cold in my hand, but my heart stayed steady. The calls started. 1, 2, 5, 10. The phone vibrated across the table like it was alive, desperate for me to pick it up. I let it ring. By the afternoon, my voicemail was full. Nathan's voice, once calm and dismissive, now frantic, cracking under the pressure. Mom, answer. Please. We can't board. They're saying the villa isn't paid. Everything's canceled. What happened? Just tell me what happened. I'll fix it. Just please pick up. And then, softer, almost like a child again. Mom, why are you doing this? I set the phone down gently, as though it were fragile glass. Because the truth was, I wasn't doing anything to them. I was simply refusing to keep doing everything for them. I spent that day in my garden, pulling weeds from between the marigolds, humming a hymn under my breath. The sun was warm on my shoulders. My hands, though wrinkled and stiff with age, worked with steady purpose. Every now and then, I'd hear the phone buzz from inside the house. I didn't rush to check it. The world didn't end when I ignored their demands. In fact, it kept going softer, freer. By evening, the messages had turned sharp. This is cruel. The kids are crying. Do you even care? You've embarrassed us. Everyone at the gate is staring. You always have to make everything about you. And then silence. For the first time in years, I was the one who had chosen the silence. And it wasn't empty. It was full of peace, of clarity, of boundaries finally drawn. That night, I lit the lavender candle I had bought for James. I set his photo on the table beside it. His smile glowed in the flicker of the flame, steady, kind. I whispered, "Did I do the right thing?" Of course, no answer came. But in the warmth of the candle, I felt something loosen inside me. A knot untied. This wasn't revenge. I hadn't shouted, hadn't cursed, hadn't sought to punish. I had simply stepped out of the role they'd written for me, the silent provider, the invisible grandmother, the bank account with no face. I had chosen, for the first time in a long time, to protect myself. And that was not cruelty. That was survival. By the next morning, the storm had passed. No more calls. No more messages. I imagined them driving home from the airport, tense and angry, the children confused, Tanya's voice sharp in the car. I imagined Nathan silent behind the wheel, jaw clenched, unwilling to admit the truth that he had tried to erase his mother, and in doing so, had erased the trip. But that wasn't my burden anymore. As I watered my plants that morning, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. For the first time, the weight was gone. The dream I had carried for 3 years had cracked open, yes, but inside that broken shell was something I hadn't expected. Freedom. The morning after the airport chaos, I woke up to quiet. No buzzing phone. No desperate messages. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the morning light filtering through my curtains. For a moment, I lay there, expecting the old ache to creep in, the familiar heaviness that came from being overlooked, unwanted. But instead, there was a lightness in my chest, as if someone had opened a window inside me. I got up, made myself tea, and opened the bank portal. The account balance had already shifted. Refunds were trickling back in, one by one, flights, villa, excursions. Each return felt like a slow untying of chains I hadn't realized I'd been dragging. As the numbers climbed back up, so did an idea. Why should that money sit there like a gravestone to a broken dream? Why should Hawaii belong to a family that no longer saw me? What if it belonged to me? And not just me, what if it belonged to people who would see me? That afternoon, I started making calls. The first was to Carol. Carol, who had lost her husband the same year I lost James, and who still wore his flannel shirts to bed for comfort. When she answered, her voice cracked, "Marilyn, is everything all right?" I told her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. How the trip had been canceled. How the family had turned away. How the money was back in my hands. And then I asked the question I hadn't dared ask anyone in years. Would you come with me? To Hawaii. There was silence, then a sharp inhale. Me? She whispered. Yes. You. And then she cried, soft, grateful tears. Oh, Marilyn. I thought I'd been forgotten. Next was Beverly, my neighbor of 20 years. Her children lived states away, visiting once every couple of years out of obligation more than love. When I asked her, she laughed through her tears. You mean it? I've never even seen the ocean. Then came Louise, who'd been raising 2 grandchildren after her own daughter disappeared into addiction. Frances, whose children never called except when they needed money. Nora, whose only son hadn't spoken to her since he married. And Doy, sweet Doy, who had buried her husband and her only child in the same year, and who often sat in church staring at the stained glass, as if waiting for someone to notice she was still alive. One by one, they said yes. One by one, I realized I wasn't the only forgotten woman. 2 weeks later, there we were, 6 women in our 70s, standing barefoot on the warm Hawaiian sand, the Pacific stretching before us like a welcome we never expected to receive. The villa I had booked was finally full, not of silent judgment or cold omission, but of laughter. Carol danced in the kitchen while chopping fruit. Beverly wore a wide-brimmed hat she'd bought just for the trip and insisted on calling herself a beach babe. Louise lay in a hammock with a book for the first time in years, unbothered by the constant needs of others. We drank wine on the balcony. We swapped stories until midnight, voices tumbling over each other like waves. We wore colorful scarves I had bought as a surprise, each one chosen with care. And when we walked through town together, we turned heads, not because we were beautiful or young, but because we were alive. And alive women shine. On the 3rd night, I lit the lavender candle. I placed James's photo at the center of the table, the ocean breeze tugging softly at the corners. For a moment, I thought I might cry. But when the women gathered around me, something different happened. Carol set her hand on mine. To James, she said gently. To love that still lasts, Beverly added. To men who saw us for who we were, said Louise. To the families we built, whispered Nora. To the families we choose, said Doy, her voice steady. And, just like that, my dream came true. Not in the way I had planned. Not with the people I had first imagined. But in a way that mattered even more. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the mirror of a beachside cafe. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Her eyes were brighter. Her back straighter. Her smile real. I wasn't invisible anymore. The women noticed too. Marilyn, you look lighter, Frances said one morning as we walked to the shore. And I realized it wasn't the sun or the sand. It was freedom. Freedom from begging for scraps of love. Freedom from waiting to be chosen. Freedom from the weight of shame. The last night of the trip, we sat barefoot on the beach, the 6 of us in a circle, the waves whispering against the shore. We didn't plan it, but we each took turns speaking, as if the ocean demanded it. I thought my story was over, Carol said softly. I thought I was a burden, Nora admitted. I thought I wasn't enough, whispered Louise. I thought no one saw me, Doy added. I thought love was something you had to earn, Beverly confessed. And then it was my turn. I looked out at the dark horizon, the stars just beginning to shine, and spoke the truth aloud. I thought I was alone. But I see now I was never alone. I just needed to find my people. The waves carried our words away, and the night held us close. That was the moment I stopped waiting for love to return in the way I had lost it. Because love was here. Love was now. Love was us, 6 women, barefoot in the sand, alive, visible, unforgotten. The day after I returned from Hawaii, a letter waited for me in my inbox. Not paper, email. Nathan. For a long time, I didn't open it. The subject line alone was enough to twist my stomach. Mom, let's talk. I brewed tea, swept the kitchen floor, fed the cat, anything to keep from clicking. But finally, I sat down and opened it. Mom, I'm sorry things got so messy. The kids were really upset. Tanya was embarrassed. I know you probably felt hurt, but you should understand, it wasn't supposed to go like that. We could have worked this out if you'd just answered the phone. Anyway, I think it's only fair you send us back some of the money. We still want to take the trip, maybe later this year. Let's put this behind us and move forward. Love. Nathan. I read it 3 times. Not once did he write, I'm sorry I left you out. Not once did he say, I see what I did. Not once did he ask, how are you? His version of love was a ledger. His version of moving forward was me handing back money so they could try again without me. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply, and I knew deep down I never would. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Beverly. "Lunch?" I asked. She laughed. "I thought you'd never ask." Within an hour, I was sitting at a cafe table with her, the smell of coffee and ocean breeze still clinging to my clothes from the trip. Soon, Carol joined. Then Louise. One by one, the women drifted in like birds returning to a safe branch. We talked, we laughed, we planned. Not just another trip, though that idea lingered, but dinners, movie nights, even a book club. We weren't just women anymore. We were family. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought of Nathan. Of the little boy with scraped knees who once clung to me when thunderstorms scared him. I thought of the teenager who rolled his eyes, but always let me hug him before school. That boy was still in there somewhere, I told myself. But he was buried too deep for me to keep digging. I had spent years trying to earn a place in his new world, waiting at the edges of his life like a shadow. But I was done waiting. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Love is not owed. Love is not guaranteed. Love must be tended, like a garden. If you neglect it long enough, it withers. Nathan had chosen to let it wither. Tanya had watered over me until I disappeared. But I was done disappearing. One evening, months later, we gathered again, my new family, the forgotten women. We spread blankets on the sand, opened a bottle of wine, and watched the sun sink into the horizon. No matching t-shirts this time. No carefully packed gift bags. Just us. As the last light faded, I thought of James. I pulled his photo from my purse, the one I had carried with me to Hawaii. I set it gently on the blanket, and the women leaned in without me asking, as if they knew this moment belonged to all of us. "To James," Carol whispered. "To all we've lost," said Doy. "To all we've found," I added. We clinked glasses. The stars came out. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Nathan never called again. Tanya never wrote. The grandchildren never came by. It hurt, yes. It always would. But grief had changed shape. It was no longer an anchor pulling me under. It was a tide that came and went, and I had learned how to stand steady when it washed over me. Because I wasn't alone anymore. The last words I'll leave are these. If you feel invisible, you are not. If you feel forgotten, you are not. If you feel used up and cast aside, remember, your story is not over. Family is not only blood. Family is not only obligation. Family is the hands that hold you when you falter, the voices that laugh with you in the dark, the people who see you when the world pretends you don't exist. I thought I was losing everything when Nathan sent that text. But in truth, I was being freed. Freed to choose love. Freed to choose joy. Freed to choose me. And if James were here, I know what he'd say. He'd take my hand, look out at the horizon, and whisper the words he told me on our honeymoon so long ago. We made it, Marilyn. We made it.